Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. I hope you had a splendid weekend. I had a fun weekend, especially on the Friday. I was out with my mother. She had a spare ticket to go and see a Janis Joplin tribute show that's in London at the moment. And so we went along to that. Actually, it wasn't a very full house. It was probably only about half full. And we had a really good night. The show is not one that I'd especially recommend. It's not a brilliant show. It's not one of those huge extravaganza affairs like the Tina Turner story that my mum is also a huge fan of. I think she's seen it several times. I'm yet to see it. But the performances were great. You know, the lady that was doing her rendition of Janis Joplin was just marvellous, incredible. And the other performers in the show were good. We had a good time. We were up and boogieing in our seats, let's put it that way. But it's not really a show that I'd recommend. It's more a collection of songs, really. We saw that, and then we went for dinner at Sheekey, which I've never been to before in London. And the reason I've never been there is because it's a fish restaurant, and I'm not into fish, really. You know, I don't mind fish and chips on a Friday night. And I have tried to be really into it, and shellfish and all of the seafood. I have gone through periods of really trying to love it, because I know that people who do love it find it really delicious. It just doesn't really do it for me, and I always prefer the alternative, and I did go for that alternative dish of a chicken. I had the Devonshire chicken with heritage carrots. I wrote down what was on the menu today because it's online. Heritage carrots, sautéed girole, a type of mushroom, and tarragon jus, and I had a side dish of spinach, buttered spinach, and then the pudding, of course, was salted caramel, creme brulee with milk ice cream, and it was really good, really, really good. Although it's given me an excuse to have a little grumble, because I noticed the service charge. Now, here in the Kingdom, the traditional service charge or tip that they add on to a meal, which is supposed to be at your discretion, optional, has always historically been, or in recent years, 12.5% of the total price. They add that on at the end. Lately, it's been creeping up. And I've been reading about this in the press, and it's been creeping up to 15%, for example, at L'Escargot. As I say, on this occasion, they've added on another 1%, and I don't appreciate it, my dear. And I'm not speaking on behalf of other countries. Of course, there's wildly differing cultures in America, for example. You tip a lot more and in different ways. But I'm very old school, my dear. I actually prefer to tip in cash. I'm actually a very, very generous tipper, and usually tip above and beyond. But I do like to make the decision based on the service I've received. And if someone's been, mardy or serving me with attitude, then I withhold. If someone's done their job, then they get a tip. If someone's exceeded my expectation or made me smile, you know the types, my dear, that shine, then that is reflected in the tip that I like to leave. And I like to leave it to that person. Now, I'm speaking as somebody who's worked as wait staff for several years, where, when I was coming through as a teenager, and also behind the scenes as a pot wash, as a kitchen pot wash. Terrifying place, the kitchen. Oh, terrifying place. Those chefs, those head chefs, another place that you really learn to have to toughen up. Well, I worked as a pot wash, and I don't believe in all this sharing the tips for wait staff with everybody else behind the scenes. I wouldn't have expected it then. And, I don't expect them to expect it now. If you want a tip, go into a tipping profession where you expect to get tipped. So I don't like all that. I don't like doing it all through the machines, this kind of thing. What a grumbler I am, but that's what I do here, isn't it, my dear? So you're going to have to put up with it, my dear. I don't like all this slow rising of the charges, though, and I'm going to be rebelling against it in my own way in the future, that's for sure. And they're rebranding it as brand charges. But despite that, despite me sounding like Ebenezer Scrooge, which I assure you I'm not, my dear, I'm really not. I just don't like these new methods creeping in. Despite that, it was a really wonderful evening. And my head has been filled with Janis Joplin all weekend. Even though I'm not a huge fan, I'm obviously a huge admirer of her talents and the feeling that her music conjures up in some of the songs. It's just not really my bag, but I still love it. And my head has been full of everything Janis all weekend. But for the really raspy, sort of screamy, shouty type of music, female-led, I suppose you could say, my cup of tea is more along the lines of Courtney Love, for example, and the band Hole. The album Live Through This is one of my very favourites, as I'm sure I've mentioned before here. And Celebrity Skin. And the first one with the Teenage Whore and everything, but Live Through This. What a work of shining brilliance. The Princess of Wales was glimpsed in public for the first time since announcing the cessation of her chemotherapy, and the Walesers were back at Balmoral and our cherished parish church for Sunday service. Isn't it reassuring? She was there in her checked wool blazer and Suffolk fedora, with her earlobes burnished in gold. These were the Cassandra Goad Temple of Heaven earrings. I wasn't especially fond of them, to tell you the truth, but the Walesers were joining their majesties, who were also glimpsed in transit, and the King's nose, I noticed, is not so bright red as it was last week. I forgot to point that out to you. Did you see it? It looked bright red, and it had the sniffles. You could hear it in his voice a few days earlier. A portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex has been rejected from a royal collection, so to speak. Well, it was acquired and then rejected because a spokesperson from the National Portrait Gallery, of which Catherine is patron and is highly esteemed, being one of the world's finest collections of portraits. The spokesperson has confessed that the gallery will not be displaying a photographic portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex that it acquired earlier this year. It's one of the photographs that was taken by Miss and Harryman. Miss and Harry's man, you know the one? The Sussex talisman. A black and white one at the World Summit it was. Well, they shouldn't have bothered acquiring it in the first place, to be quite honest with you. The spokesman said that following cataloguing and its digitisation was added to our website at the beginning of this month. There are no current plans to display the portrait in the gallery. Snubbed. And I have a quick message for the viewer by the name of, well, I'm going to call you CT, and you'll know if this applies to you, so don't worry. Although, of course, you won't be watching because you're unsubscribed at the moment, aren't you, my dear? So I don't know why I'm still talking to you as if you're still watching. But just on off chance, the viewer CT has been a long-term viewer of this channel, and she didn't like what I had to say in the last video, presumably, so she did what I asked my viewers not to do, which was to announce and flounce. And she announced her departure, but only temporarily. She said words to the effect of, "I'm leaving for now, I'm leaving for a while." As I say, she has subscribed for a long time, and she has flounced and announced before, at least once before, possibly several times. And every time she returns, and the first time she announced this departure was a couple of years ago now, and actually I remember the comment as being quite spiteful and quite vindictive in its tone and the atmosphere of it. You know, it did sting, and it stung because I recognised her name, and I recognised the fact that she had once sent me a tip to treat myself to a cup of coffee, which was very kind indeed. So I didn't respond on this occasion, and I didn't block on this occasion a couple of years ago. Well, I thought I wouldn't be seeing her again anyway because she'd flounced and announced and gone, so I just left it at that. But she did return. I noticed she returned, and she's been here for a couple of years, and she's left some really nice comments, some fine, perfectly reasonable comments. But if ever there's something that passes my lips she's not pleased with, then she expresses her displeasure, and sometimes she is rather impolite about it. And I'm quite simply not here to indulge that sort of behaviour. So this is a message for you, my dear, even though you're not watching, even though you've flounced off. I'm not here for it. As I say, I appreciate the fact you treated me to a cup of coffee, but I'm afraid that doesn't buy you impudence. And it doesn't buy you the right to infuse this atmosphere with something that I find a little passive-aggressive and spiteful. You know, that is the worst kind of subscriber, I'm afraid. Far worse than any standard haters. Far worse than that. When somebody's, wishy-washy about it, in and out, and thinks that they can dress me down or leave their displeasure and then re-emerge. No, my dear. Blocked. Blocked you are. No desire to interact with you again and play nicey-nicey with these sort of types. If you've left, then you won't be watching, my dear, so you won't be offended. So I can prattle on away to myself, can't I? You won't know that you're blocked. So when you return, you can keep typing away your comments to yourself, and I won't have to watch your avatar with the eyes rising up every time you say something prickly, will I, my dear? You can type away to your heart's content and make your complaints and flounce and announce as much as you like, and I shall be oblivious to the fact. Isn't that wonderful and hunky-dory? Now that I've got that out of my system, I wish you very well, my dear. I wish you blessings and healing. No rancour here. Nothing but goodwill. Bright wishes to you, my dear. Ciao for now. Aside from myself, another queen of this kingdom, Queen Camilla, was effortlessly chic at Braemar Literary Festival in Aberdeenshire over the weekend, and at the Fife Arms she wore a blue jumper and jeans and a puffer. Little Tommy was in attendance, her dear son, with the ugliest trainers in Christendom. The event was a collaboration with her own initiative, the Queen's Reading Room, which is so popular and has been so successful, and interest has been growing, that apparently their Majesties are thinking about ticking and tocking and taking to that platform, because it's really drawing the attention and the interest of the youngsters coming through, which was its objective. Do you see how royalty really does stuff that works? Unlike that of the ex-royals, such as Prince Harry, who joined Queen Mathilde of the Belgians at a dinner organised by World Health Organization in New York. Well, isn't he brave, ladies and gentlemen? Isn't he brave to see Haribo out and about without wifey, clinging on to him to soothe him through every occasion? No wife, no consort, no escort with Haribo this time. Just the Hollywood star Forrest Whitaker, so he can't see the woods for the trees. And the UN agency heads were there, dignitaries, at this event to honour survivors of childhood violence. What exactly is this errant duke doing there? That's the quiz, isn't it, my dears? What's he doing there among the dignitaries and the queens and this, that and the tenths? This is a second son, sliding at an astonishingly fast rate down the line of succession. Slipping and sliding down those rungs like a game of snakes and ladders, finding himself at the bottom. At the bottom, what's he doing there? Rocking out. It's embarrassing, isn't it, my dear? Hi, Queenie. Hi, do you remember me, little Princey? Remember me, little Prince Harry? Oh, wonderful they are. I'm Queen Mathilde of Belgium. You remember me, Princey Kins? He is a Montecito now. Why can't he start behaving like it instead of pretending that he is his brother? No, my love. Henry the Ninth he will never be. Never. All of these folks in New York for the UN General Assembly, which kicks off today, and we're going to be seeing more of Harry, I'm afraid, because he's got a few things planned and up his sleeve. And he was also in attendance at Kevin Costner's charity concert at the Oceanside estate of Kevin Costner. Jeff Bridges was there, Rob Lowe and Pink. What a rum-do, to celebrate the heroism of first responders. And you might recall that both Harkles attended last year. This year, solo. This year, Harry alone again. What a big boy. He's so brave, doing all these things without Mummy Markle. He presented an award to a helicopter pilot and looked very pleased with himself. And there were Phillips all over the place. Phillips at the Blenheim International Horse Trials in Oxford. Savannah Phillips in particular was in a jocular mood as she was cheering on Auntie Zara. But little Isla was also spied with Autumn, who shared a hug with her former sister-in-law. All very civil, isn't it? All very mature and all very civil. Royal relationships tend to thrive after divorce, don't they, my dears? Evidently, with the exception, of course, of the Wales-Spencer union, although that didn't really have time to mature after the divorce due to the death of the late Diana. But, you know, when you think about it, the Yorks, the Parker Bowleses, the Princess Royal, and Captain Mark Phillips, and many more, all keep things very civil, don't they, my dear? Very civil. But one half of the safest royal couple in the entire world, and I'm talking about our dear Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, has been in Zanzibar, and, as you know, Tanzania, Zanzi and Tanzi, I think are wonderful nicknames for those places. But in Zanzibar, the Duchess of Edinburgh observed efforts to combat lymphatic filariasis, the mosquito-transmitted disease that damages the human lymph system. Her Royal Highness saw door-to-door medical administration, with the patient given the 12 billionth donation of treatment. Later, there was a celebratory event to mark the milestone where the Duchess met with children and the community, and as ever, the people of Zanzi were enchanted by the Duchess of Edinburgh. The entire village was lifted by her royal presence, and Sophie was equally charmed by the folk of Zanzi. And it was teal appeal on display. She was a real rave. First of all, she was wearing a peasant dress in teal hippie, and then this gown that was an absolute rave, the Zimmermann Otti print linen dress, just gorgeous. The King attended a summit at Dumfries House, a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister and Police Scotland representatives to discuss their initiative targeting violent behaviour. His Majesty listened to members of his own trust and foundation and of the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit as they shared reflections on identifying the root causes of violence and solutions to increase support. The King and Angie Rayner met with students from the local school who have been taking part in woodland activities. And I'll read out just a little highlight from a message from the King to mark the 80th anniversary of Operation Market Garden, and you can pause the screen if you wish to read the full message, but it read, "Today, on this 80th anniversary, it is with a deep sense of gratitude and humility that we remember all those in British, Allied and Commonwealth forces who served and died fighting for our freedom. Let us also remember those magnificently courageous members of the Dutch resistance and gallant civilians who endured so much during the Second World War. We will never forget the heroism and sacrifice made by so many in the pursuit of peace and liberation. Charles R." And his sister, the Princess Royal, was busy in Arnhem itself, attending events in the Netherlands to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Arnhem. And this battle, as part of Operation Market Garden, was the largest airborne assault in history and one of the most ambitious Allied operations of World War II. Her Royal Highness attended a reception at the Airborne Museum featuring a parachute display by the Red Devils, known in royal circles as the Harrys. Anne's stirring speech paid tribute to the bravery and sacrifice of British, Dutch and Allied troops. As President of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, she joined veterans and armed forces personnel at the cemetery to remember the fallen and placed a wreath at the cross of sacrifice. Thank you for joining me. I'm wishing you a splendid week ahead. I will not be charging you a 13.5% service charge on this broadcast, but if you'd like to treat me to a coffee, my tip jar is in the description box below. Take care, my dears. I will see you soon. Toodle pip.